more that you can organize your thinking, organize your execution, frame things, get consensus, have things really steeped in reality, in an empirical manner, the better your chances of success.
Welcome to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods, a podcast at the nexus of hospitality, business, culture, and the mind. Now here's your host, Woolco Foods CEO, Stephen Toboroff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. I am your host, Stephen Toboroff, and today I want to discuss in what I hope will be a very constructive and actionable way one of the most important challenges we have to face and deal with successfully in business, which is problem solving. And the approach that I'm going to take, and why I characterized or labeled this podcast, titled the podcast, an Aristotelian approach to problem solving in business, is because over the last, let's call it 3 to 4 months, 5 months perhaps, the majority of my reading has been in the subject of philosophy. For those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that I was a English major, English language and literature major at University of Chicago for my BA. Later on in life, I obtained a law degree, but I had not read much philosophy in my life. And about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I read for the first time Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, which I loved, and that started me off on a journey in philosophy, which I'm in the midst of and very much enjoying. And I did a podcast episode where I was discussing the mind and was referencing, I believe it was Epictetus and other philosophers, and sort of tying it all into how we can utilize our thinking to the best of its potential or work towards that in the realm of business. And I got so many interesting and flattering and pleasant emails from that episode. But one that really motivated me to write this one was somebody who had appreciated the episode, appreciated the area explored, but wanted more in terms of how it can be brought into the actual realm of business. And I really appreciated that question or that request, because what makes philosophy so valuable, I think, in general, and what has certainly made it valuable to me, is the positive impact that it's had in many aspects of my life. And I think for philosophy to warrant the respect that it absolutely deserves, it needs to have applicability and efficacy in, for lack of a better word, the real world. And of all the philosophers that I've been reading, the one that really seems to represent that concept is Aristotle. I just recently finished the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, which takes on the subject of what does it mean to flourish and what does it mean to have a good life? Great question and an important question. But in the reading of Nicomachean Ethics, the way that Aristotle approaches his subject matter and the questions that he seeks to explore is, in my mind, ideal for a business person in a lot of different contexts, but particularly in business and particularly in problem solving, which is what we're going to discuss today. I just want to give a brief definition of Aristotelian so that people who are not familiar with Aristotle or philosophy will understand what I mean by that. And then we're going to jump into the real context or the real meat of this episode, if you will. So Aristotelianism involves, quote, belief in the primacy of the individual in the realm of existence and the applicability to reality of a certain set of explanatory concepts. And that is absolutely the experience that I had with Nicomachean Ethics. And that's the approach that I want to sort of extrapolate from that into problem solving in business, which is a subject that I've given a lot of thought to. But I have to say that my thinking was quite impacted and refined by my reading of Aristotle. So hence the title of the podcast, and let's get into it right now. So no matter what size business you have, no matter what business you're in, you're going to have problems, challenges. I prefer the word challenge, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to use the word problem here, because a problem for me, I'm going to define that as a matter that needs to be addressed and it needs to be addressed effectively in order for your business to continue moving forward in the direction you want, in order for circumstances, rather, to move forward in a positive direction. So I'm going to use the word problem, even though I always prefer challenge, but for this episode, I'm going to use problem. And the question is, okay, so we have to deal with this. So how do we approach problem solving to be impactful in two ways? One, addressing the immediate issue, but two, setting in place a set of principles, dynamics, habits, approaches that can serve as a template going forward and thereby expedite things and increase both efficacy and efficiency. So the first thing, of course, is to identify what is the actual problem. And for that, we need to use our reason and not emotion. A lot of times things will come up, particularly if they involve employees or other members of our team. And it's just the nature of life that sometimes these dynamics are going to be infused with emotion, whether that be people being angry at one another, whether people who are concerned about getting into trouble for a mistake they may have made, whatever the case may be. And that level of noise and energy and emotion around the dynamic can cloud what's really going on. So an example would be somebody comes to you and says, my colleague, Joe, always interrupts me when I'm talking to this customer, and now the customer doesn't want to buy from me anymore. And then the other person says, well, the reason I do that is because Mike never listens and I have to coach him, and I'm coaching him in real time because I want to save the customer. And there's a lot of tumult about that. Now, in my opinion, what's the real problem? The real problem is that a customer is not getting the appropriate level of service or interaction to maximize their positive views of the company. It's not about Joe and Mike and their dispute. It's not about training. Those are subsidiaries. The real problem is we've got a situation where our customer is getting a subpar experience. Because of this, let's solve it. So, one, identify the problem and do it with reason, not emotion. And if other people are emotional, it's your responsibility to say, hold on, let's take a step back and really analyze what this issue is. Because ultimately, you're not going to be able to solve people's emotional outbursts, but you can solve dynamics that are occurring in the real world and correct them. Okay. Once you've framed the problem and you understand it, the next thing is you have to decide what it is that you want to fix. What it is that you actually need to take action to correct for this dynamic to go from being a problem to something that is solved. So in my very simplistic example, the thing that is required to fix it may be better training, better utilization of meetings, better utilization of other forms of communication so that customers are not interrupted when they're in the middle of speaking to one of your team members. Whatever the case may be, identify with as much precision as you can what it is that you want to fix. Once you've done that, you then need to incorporate anyone in the organization that is going to be impacted or can have an impact on the dynamic that is problematic. And you need to define the problem as clearly as you can for everybody who's involved. Because again, one of the things you want to avoid in business and in life is repeat mistakes. If you come across a problem or a mistake in business at a time when you're doing well, and it's something that you can fix, and by fixing, perhaps set the table for your company to move forward in a more successful manner, then that's a good thing. It's a positive thing. But if the problem itself continues to repeat itself over and over again, that's both unnecessary and can be corrosive. And if the problem that you're trying to solve involves multiple departments or multiple people, you need to make sure that everybody is on the same page, okay? And by doing that, you have to say, okay, this is the problem. I understand it. This immediate group of people understands it, but I need to define this dynamic for everybody that could come into contact with it so that they have full understanding of what the problem is. They see it as clearly as everybody else does. And then finally, assess what support you need to fix it. So in the circumstance that I just gave, the example that I just gave, That example lends itself to a solution that can be contained within the four walls of an organization, hopefully. But there are problems that come up that require outside expertise. Sometimes it could be legal. Sometimes it could be a consultant. Sometimes it could be people in different industries that have experience with something you want to fix. Let's say you've onboarded a new software solution. You really like it. You think it has enormous potential. You can understand its potential, and you've spoken to other companies that are having a great experience with it. The software, either upload or utilization or training or some aspect of it, is causing a problem. It's causing a problem for your customers. It's causing a problem for your inner team. That may be a situation where you need to get outside support. Maybe you need to bring in somebody to help you integrate the software. Maybe you need to speak with other people who have successfully gone through an integration, run your question past them, get an answer. My point is, and I think it's quite obvious at this point, there are a lot of problems that you're going to have in business that will require you to get support and information from outside parties. And so you need to assess, once you've identified the problem, once you've defined it clearly, then assess, is this something that can be solved internally, or do I need outside support? And then go and get that so that it can be done. So once we've done those things, now let's move to the next step of solving. Well, when we get to the issue of solving a problem, particularly in a business where you have several employees and departments, and you're going to begin the task of solving it, you want to identify who in your organization is going to be responsible for solving this problem. Without accountability and clarity of purpose, particularly with something that's as important and as basic, but nonetheless extremely important as solving a problem, you need to identify who's going to be involved in that process and who's responsible. So many organizations run into so many problems because they're not clear and specific about that in the inception. And then what happens is people will say things such as, well, that was Mary's responsibility, or nobody told me to do that, or I thought I only had to do this. So as the leader, let's follow through on the example of software. Let's say that the issue you're having is with integration. Well, which of your team members are going to be responsible for solving the problem that's understood? Identify them. Let them know what your expectation is, and then they will, of course, have to go about it. Don't leave it up in the air and say to somebody, listen, this better be solved in a week, and the person you say that to is only tangentially involved with the issue, doesn't know what they're supposed to do, hasn't been given the authority or clear communication to recruit the people they need. That's not problem solving, that's creating more problems. And a lot of times business leaders do that because they're not organized thinkers. Just to digress a moment here, and again, really speak in an Aristotelian-like manner, I believe it's the responsibility of a leader to be able to think and act in an organized manner. People can't read our minds. We can't read other people's minds. I did an earlier podcast on communication. I would recommend people do that. Listen to that. Very important to communicate effectively, but it's also important that we as business leaders have the capacity to organize our thinking so that we can execute what it is that we want to do and not create chaos in the process. A lot of times that happens because people get frustrated or they're unclear as to what they want. So with respect to the problem solving, identify who the team members are that you're going to be using. Second, if you've determined that you need outside support, identify exactly what that outside support looks like and be as exhaustive as possible. If it's the software issue, the outside support that we want is the company that we bought the software from. One of the references said they would help us, and we're going to have to hire an integration consultant to make it happen. Whatever it is, identifying that you need outside support is great. Now identify exactly what that outside support is and who you're going to use. So an example of it being done properly would be just what I described. Okay, we're going to hire this integration consultant. You're going to set up a meeting with the two people who brought us live, and you're going to have a phone call or a meeting with one of the references within the next week. That's a good example. A bad example is, I don't know, figure it out. Get somebody who knows what they're doing, get them in here and let's do it. Now, of course, you can do that for your senior management, but then if that's the case, then the people to whom this podcast is impactful is senior management, because then you're the ones that are going to have to be speaking in a clear manner and getting people to rally behind it. So identify the team members that are responsible. Let them know what your expectations are. Identify who the outside experts are, okay? And get them involved. And then have a determination as to whether or not this is a problem that is one that requires a one-time discussion, which is an easy fix. I'll give you an example of that. In a logistics department, a customer gets their delivery late. They want it between 7 and 10. It showed up twice at 12 o'clock. Okay, that is a situation where I need the dispatcher and the sales manager to coordinate, make whatever changes are necessary, confirm that they've been changed, and then have the salesman follow up whenever the customer orders. That's pretty much a one-time conversation with follow-up. Nothing in life happens without follow-through. That's a one-time conversation. The software solution is probably something, if it's a big issue, let's talk about something that's not a problem, that's the software you've already brought on board. Let's say you're doing something else. You've made the decision that you're not happy with your marketing initiatives. And so you've hired a new digital marketing firm. You've made an investment in that. You have expectations because you need it to drive up your new customer acquisition as well as upselling amongst your current customer base, because the outcome you're getting right now is unsatisfactory. Well, that's not a one conversation situation. That's an ongoing problem that could take 3, 6 months, 2 months, whatever it is, to address. So for that type of situation, you've identified that it's not a one discussion type deal. Put in place a structured system where that problem is going to be reviewed and assessed on a weekly or bi-weekly, whatever you determine, basis. You want to make sure that you're looking at it in a consistent basis. You want to make sure you're benchmarking what progress you've made. You want to make sure that you're identifying any new issues that might come up. But the point being, it's not a one conversation thing. That's another mistake people make. They think that one conversation is appropriate for a complex problem that can require one conversation a week for the next 3 months. Make that decision at the beginning and proceed accordingly. The next dynamic which is incorporated into this is very important, and we touched on it before, but to the extent that you can, clearly define the roles of the individuals as you see it. It's a well-established thing in business, well-established concept, that those who have responsibility will do better. Accountability, they'll do better. If they can have the creative dynamic to it, then that will make people do even better still. But the point being is clearly define the roles as you see it. This is the role of your inner team. This is the role of the outside team. This is the expectations of what you want to do. Once you've done that, particularly if it's a complicated problem that is going to require senior management, I think it's appropriate at that time to ask for other people's perspective or concerns. Because when you embark on solving a problem, it's better to have everybody pulling in the same direction at the beginning. And just because you see something a certain way doesn't mean that you're seeing the whole picture, and it doesn't mean that there's not a perspective out there that could make a more impactful solution if you were to have it. So ask for a series of perspectives from people and hear them out. Again, we want everybody pulling in the same direction. Now we get to the most important part, which is clearly define what a favorable outcome looks like. Particularly with complicated problems that at the end of them, once you solve them, they're going to be terrific for your business, terrific for your organization. If you can clearly define at the beginning what that favorable outcome looks like and have everybody understand it and buy into it, it's going to not only get them focused on the immediate day-to-day aspect or moment-to-moment aspect of problem solving, but it's going to give them a very clear vision of what it looks like at the end. And that can be a very positive and compelling vision. But if you don't clearly define what the outcome is, how will you know that you've really solved it? So just to give it a little bit more flavor, what I had said before was Okay, software, not happy with the integration. These three people internally are going to spearhead it. They're going to work with these forces outside of it. At that point, does anybody have any questions, concerns, ideas, thoughts on how we approach this? Get that out on the table. Okay, great, address it. Get the consensus. Move forward. Now, okay, so my expectation is at the end of this, we're going to be using this software essentially seamlessly. It's going to be fully automated, and the only engagement we're going to need, absent a one-off issue that we can't control, are the annual upgrades. We're not going to be dealing with these repeated glitches, mistakes, setbacks, whatever going forward. Clearly define the solution that you want. Once you've done that, again, go back and get consensus. Because you might find somebody will say, you know what, Steve, that's a great solution, but I would add one other component to the solution. We want this to be cost effective. We want this to have saved us X number of dollars or made us X number of dollars. So again, go back and get consensus from the people that are going to be working with you to solve this problem, because again, the more ownership they have, the more investment they have based upon the fact that they've been able to make decisions, be creative, take ownership, the better the outcome you're going to get. Now that's kind of the entire picture of what it looks like from the beginning, which is identifying the problem, framing the problem, finding out who's going to work with you on this problem, finding out what additional resources you're going to need for the problem, establishing expectations for the people who are involved in it, getting consensus for that, establishing what a successful outcome looks like, getting consensus for that. The final and most valuable from a lasting standpoint part of this equation is going to be, once the problem is solved, debriefing it. And what do I mean by that? You've now gone through the successful exercise of identifying a problem, software, logistics, sales, finance, and you've got it where you want it and things are working. Debrief it so that you can understand what it is that you did that enabled you to successfully solve the problem. Did you select the right people to spearhead the initiative within your organization? Did the outside team or people that you recruited do an exceptional job, or did they not really do as much as you would have liked? Was the outcome better than you thought it would be? The same? Was the outcome lasting? Did people work well together in the solving of this problem? When you debrief these dynamics that exist at the perimeter of the activity of solving it, you then set the table to use that information, profit from that information the next time you have to solve something. So the debrief is always important. And I always say debrief things that go well just as much as you debrief things that go poorly. You know, it's very common in business that when things are not working, immediately people spring into action because it could be a crisis or it could be something that's really visible that if it's not dealt with, could be a problem. And that's when people spring into action. But it is extremely constructive to really understand when things go right, when you've executed properly, when you've achieved an objective, how it was that you did that. Because the more you understand it, the more that you can replicate it going forward. So those are my thoughts with respect to problem solving. And I mention again, framing it as an Aristotelian approach because I really believe that in business, and particularly when you have to deal with a problem, the more that you can organize your thinking, organize your execution, frame things, get consensus, have things really steeped in reality, in an empirical manner, the better your chances of success. Sometimes people don't like this because some people enjoy emotion, chaos. Some people enjoy not being responsible. There's all kinds of psychological dynamics that exist, and not everybody finds the approach that I've described as fun or enjoyable. But I do believe it's an effective way to do it because it gives you all kinds of opportunities every step of the way, much as Aristotle gives us opportunities every step of the way of reading the Nicomachean Ethics to see where he's going. in his effort to explain very complicated concepts, very important concepts. But how does he do it? By breaking them down into very small, discrete, understandable steps, and then making sure that there's consensus or understanding of each step. So I want to thank everybody for listening. If this podcast has been of value to you, it would be of value and greatly appreciated by me if you would give this podcast a 5-star rating, give it a comment. As always, I so appreciate and enjoy the emails that I get. You can reach me at steven@woolcofoods.com, or you can DM me at Woolco Foods on our Instagram page. Always love to hear from people, always love to get new ideas, questions, such as the one that inspired me to do this podcast today. And I'm always greatly appreciative for you taking the time to listen to this. And with that, I just want to wish everybody to have an awesome, awesome day.
Thank you for listening to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. Please be sure to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. And to learn more about Woolco Foods or Stephen Toboroff, please visit us at woolcofoods.net.